All right. So yeah, it's the More Knowledge Show. It's July 17th, and it's episode number 31, I think. Anyway, so the number one topic I probably need to talk about is schools, because that's the main argument that's going on around the world, which is, should schools reopen? Okay, and it's two sides. Well, I guess it's three sides to this debate, right? Because it's some people are saying schools should just open completely, with no sort of safety measures. There's other people saying that schools should reopen, but there needs to be all these safety guidelines. And then there's people saying that schools should absolutely just not reopen. And I think that overall, if schools reopen, it's going to cause more harm than the added benefit kids would actually receive from having in-person education. Okay, so obviously it makes sense why in-person education is better than a computer. All right, that's just common sense, because a lot of times people are not going to be all that motivated to stay on top of their education if there's not a teacher standing right there whose job is literally to force you to is really there to push you, right? But in our circumstances, I don't think teachers are going to be able to do that, because the teachers are going to be so worried having to comply with all these rules, having to stay safe, from a pandemic, and to which teachers are probably at a pretty big risk, at least compared to students. I understand people say that chances are, if a student gets the coronavirus, it's not going to be too terrible for that student. But if you're a teacher and you get the coronavirus, not only is your life at risk, now you have to miss a few weeks, and then that's going to completely throw off the entire class. And if you have a situation where there's an outbreak in the school and all the teachers get the coronavirus, that's going to completely throw off the entire schedule. And not only that, even if the teacher stays healthy, all right, you're still going to have all of these other problems. You're going to have all these other distractions. You're going to have to make sure that every student is doing the right thing at every time, which is going to be nearly impossible. So yeah, I get it. It is important for students to be inside the classroom and learning, but is that actually going to happen? That's the question. You cannot use a model of a normal world when trying to discuss an issue in an abnormal world, right? The world is not normal right now, and you cannot apply a standard that you would usually apply to how you would think of normal times. Now, there is an argument overall of, should schools even be in person? Should we just adopt online schooling overall, even in spite of the pandemic? Just completely go all in on, I guess, computers teaching us. And to that, I think that is a bad idea. I do think that it's good that kids are in classrooms, but in our situation, you have to change how you think about it. But obviously, there is a election motive to this entire school, into this entire debate, because for Trump, he wants to have this narrative. He wants to create it, at least, that he took the country from completely shut down to a return to, I guess, normal, right? So our country went from shut down to fires to riots in the streets, and he's going to bring us back to normal. He's going to bring back sports. He's going to bring back school. Everything's going to feel the same as it was prior to the pandemic. And then he's going to attribute that to himself, because that's kind of the only narrative he could possibly grasp onto. He doesn't have the economy anymore. The economy's terrible. The economy was never that good, but now it's terrible. Okay, so he really can't hold on to that. And that was kind of his main argument. He cannot say that he's for law and order, because if you saw the riots, clearly he's been the opposite. He's created, his presence has oversaw more, he has oversaw a lack of law and order not law and order, right? And so all he can really say is, at least I saved the country from the coronavirus. But the issue is that him doing that is contradicting what pretty much every scientist is saying, and people are hearing these scientists, and then they're hearing Trump, and then all they hear there is, you know, and it's easy for people to figure out that he's just doing this to make himself look good, like, right? People do not actually think that anything's really improved. You know, even people who think that school should return, the people who think that school should return are probably thinking that because either they just want to make sure that Trump gets elected because they support him, or they think that the coronavirus is not going to really hurt anything, right? It's just going to be normal. It's just going to be a few people get sick and nothing major is going to change. But I just do not think that's going to be the truth. I'm not sure, for me personally, if I'm going to go back to school or not. I'm going to have to see what happens. I'm going to try to get more information, see how things play out there. But I think that it's going to be a lot of problems, and it's going to vary. You know, in some places it's going to be worse than others. In some school systems, maybe it will be like normal, but it's going to be plenty of places where kids would honestly be in a better position if they were just learning online. But now I understand it's suboptimal. All right, when kids are learning online, they do not have a teacher there to push them, to make them do all this work. A lot of the kids are going to slack off. They're not going to really make much of an effort to actually learn anything. A lot of kids are probably going to be cheating. All of that is true, okay? But I don't see it being much better if kids are in school and you have, you know, people's health are at risk and everything's going to be completely thrown off balance to where you can't have a normal education experience. And even in our normal education experience, our education's already kind of flawed. So just imagine you already have a flawed education framework, and then you throw in and then you throw in a pandemic on top of that. That's going to be it's going to be completely terrible. Okay, so yeah, that's the schools debate. And I guess also some people on the other side are saying it's also an agenda to keep the schools closed to make sure that Trump looks bad. But I would not really say that, because it's not just people are just saying that schools should be closed and citing no evidence or providing no real reason for why a school should be closed, because it's what the intellectual power of this nation is behind the idea of schools being closed. The only thing that's behind the idea of reopening schools is just emotion. All right, and emotion can work in politics sometimes, but I think in this, the science and the, I guess, intellectual side of things is going to overpower the emotion, because it's just overwhelmingly obvious to people that it's not normal, that things have not really improved that much, and just screaming constantly that it's normal again, that the pandemic is not a concern, is not going to be enough to really convince people that what you're saying is the truth. And I think because of that, because the school reopening is Trump's last attempt to save his presidency, I really just don't see how he can pull off this election, right? Because, you know, people, a lot of times with a president, it's not really about how smart you are or how much you actually get done. It's about how you look. All right, and the president just does not look good in this situation. When you come out and you completely disregard how people feel about multiple areas, right? When you talk about the Confederate statues, okay, even if he truly does not support tearing down Confederate statues, it makes no sense from his perspective to take such a hard stance in support of that when clearly the opinion of the nation has changed. As a politician, you have to constantly adapt with how the opinion of the nation changes. That's why politicians can seem so inconsistent at times. You hear a politician early in their career compared to how they were late in the career, they sound entirely different. But that's because as a politician, you have to constantly adapt. You know, it's kind of, but he's not really doing that, right? His ideas, his persona worked in 2016. Okay, it did. But he's not adjusting. He's not changing. And it does not matter who you are if you do not adjust, if you do not change your branding, your appearance over time, you're not going to last in politics. And I don't really think he understands that, because he's kind of stubborn. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. And I would say politics is an entirely different game than just having a business. Okay, if you have a business, you're allowed to be stubborn, and well, you're allowed to be stubborn to a certain degree. But as long as what you're doing works, and as long as you're providing some type of service that people are willing to buy, people will continue buying from you. But in politics, you know, even if you are an effective leader, okay, if your branding, if your approach does not change with the times, it's going to be really bad. You're not going to stay elected, right? Like something like Coke, for example. Coke has been the same for years. Coke has came out with new products, but their main product, their identity has not really changed. You know, and a company like Coke is still pretty successful. It does not work like that in politics. I don't think President Trump understands that, and that's going to be to his disadvantage overall as we approach the election. But I guess, you know, besides the schools, overall everything has gotten worse, especially in the past couple of weeks. You know, I guess by the middle of June, a lot of the protests, a lot of the riots, the extremely violent stuff is kind of toned down. But now, in fact, it's actually popping up again. If you look at what's going on in Portland, you have police coming in with unidentifiable vehicles, and they're pretty much snatching people off the streets. And of course, the coronavirus cases are picking up. The economy is slowing down again, and it appears that we are returning to where we were, where we were like a month ago, and that is definitely not good. Okay, because it did feel like, kind of like I was saying, I predicted this a couple episodes back. I was saying how it appears like things have gotten much better. Right? It appears, the coronavirus is toning down. People are in restaurants again. People are out eating. They're out talking. They're out laughing. It's wonderful, right? The NBA is coming back. The stock market's up. The economic numbers are amazing. But I said that all of that was going to be very temporary. All right, that was just a temporary boost. And that's what happens when you take a, if you have someone that's dead, and then somehow they become alive again. For a moment, it's going to seem like, a lot has changed. But, well, okay, that's probably not a good example. I don't really know what I'm talking about right there. But it was a temporary effect that happens when you go from a very low place to a slightly higher place. All right, when you're in an extremely low place and then you get a slight improvement, it feels amazing. Right? Because, okay, I think I have a better example. Let's say, every time you drink water, it does not taste that amazing, right? It's just water, right? It's normal stuff. It's something that people will do every day if you want to live. You have to drink water. But of course now, if you're in a desert and you don't have any water, and then you spend a whole day without any water, and you're on the verge of death, and then you finally take a sip of water, it's going to feel absolutely incredible. It's going to feel amazing. It's going to feel like it's the most insanely good substance ever, right? It's just so incredible. But after a while, after you've recovered from your dehydration, and then you kind of get back to normal, water is going to taste normal again. It's not going to taste amazing. Every time you drink water, it's just water. It's going to go back to being plain water. And I guess I can say that with our world in general, is that our world it's fundamentally in a bad place right now. And yes, of course, you can go from a completely closed, shut down economy to a reopened economy, and it's going to feel amazing temporarily. But over time, those fundamental problems are going to come back, and that's going to be our reality again. Same with water. Water is boring, okay? It's just a boring drink. But of course, if you're in a desert and then you drink water, it somehow seems amazing again. But over time, it's going to go back to its fundamental state. Everything returns to its fundamental state. Short-term movements away from its equilibrium is completely driven by emotion and illusions. And that's pretty much what a lot of us has fallen into the trap of. That's why the stock market rose so much, because it fell into that illusion that everything has just gotten so much better. The unemployment rate is dropping. It's great. The unemployment rate is still over 10%. That's higher than it ever was in the last recession. Okay, and people were always talking about how terrible the last recession was, and how a lot of people have not recovered from the last recession. Well, guess what? The unemployment rate is still higher than it was then, and it's probably even higher than the 11% number that we're hearing on the news, because even the people who collect the data themselves admit that the numbers are flawed, because it's hard to count this. It's such a difficult situation that it's hard to count these numbers. So a lot of people are saying that the unemployment rate is still, it's way over 11% right now, and I believe that. And eventually, probably a couple years from now, people will go back and realize how much worse the unemployment rate is. But a lot of people were saying that it seemed like we're going to have a rapid recovery, but everything is starting to go back to its equilibrium state. All right, and our equilibrium state in present times is not good. All right, it's a lot of chaos, it's a lot of violence, it's a lot of disorder. That is who we are at the moment. And any short-term deviations from the equilibrium are going to be transitory. They're not going to last. And until something really changes, I guess, something elementary changes about our world. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I think that we're going to be in this terrible overall situation for a long time. And I'm not just talking about it on one level. I'm not just talking about the economy or the stock market. I'm just talking about overall. People are going to be less happy over these next few years. There's going to be more. People are going to be less optimistic about the future. And it's kind of unfortunate, because considering that I am going to be moving up into the world in this time period, this is not the best time to be entering the world and leaving school, because it's going to be a lot of problems. But really, we've kind of been in this state since the last recession, right? So it's like, it's not as if that this state has just descended upon us. But there's a lot of tricks that made us not realize how bad things were. But I guess the coronavirus pandemic really unveiled the problems that our world has been having for a long time. And all these problems are really coming out. But in a way, it may honestly be a good thing, right? Because if the coronavirus pandemic did not make us realize our problems, then our problems would get worse, and soon another bigger crisis would happen that would be even much worse than the one we're having right now. So, in a historical context, maybe many years from now, people will talk about the coronavirus, this whole pandemic situation, is actually being, I guess, a positive, because it did kind of wake people up and make people realize, like, yes, something is wrong. And that's kind of the first step, okay, is to realize that something's wrong. But you can't just continuously realize that something's wrong. I feel like that we have a problem of doing that, where we just constantly point out for years and years and years that something is wrong, but we don't ever think, okay, well then, what can actually be done to solve that, right? Because it's easy to say that something's wrong. It's very hard to come up with a solution. And the reason why it's hard to come up with a solution is because if you propose a solution and your solution makes things worse, then you have to take responsibility for that. And people do not like to take responsibility. People just like to appear that they're actively solving a problem. And I think that applies for everyone. That applies for me. and anyone out here who's talking, okay? I'm always out here talking about how bad things are. I don't always give direct means to solve them. And that's gonna have to be our next step for all of us, for me, for everyone else out here who's listening, or just overall. We need to take the next step, because we've been in this state for a long time where all we've been saying every day is that something is wrong. Okay, but that's easy. That's an easy way out. It's easy just to say something's wrong and appear that you're on the right side of progress, that you're trying to make things better, but you're really not making things better. You're just constantly repeating the same thing over and over again. That absolutely solves nothing. Anyway, yeah, I was talking pretty fast this episode, but it's pretty hot out here, and I'm honestly trying to go back inside. But that's the More Knowledge Show. I'll see y'all next week.